It was a college football Saturday on Halloween in 2020. What else did you expect? We said despite having just one ranked versus ranked matchup, we were still going to see a handful of upsets, a handful of scares in week 9 of college football. And that's exactly what we got. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, breaking down the absolute madness that was a Halloween college football Saturday, a weekend that saw 5 top 25 teams go down, a weekend that saw some major statements that were made, and a weekend that left us with a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. So we are here to recap and analyze the biggest games and the biggest moments from this past weekend, just like we do every week. And again, timestamps for every game that we're going to discuss today down in the description below so you can find your team and the games that interest you the most relatively quickly. But first, let's take a look at how we did this week. Look, we're getting hot here at the Gridiron Expert. 20-5 straight up this weekend. That brings our overall to 125-37 on the year. One of the best marks this late in the season that we've ever had. 77.2%. It's the third week in a row that we've had at least an 80% winning percentage straight up. And we are 55% over the past 3 weeks against the spread. Really starting to heat up against the spread here. We started slow. We said don't worry about it. We're here to play the long game. We knew we were going to get hot. It's happening now. 6-4, 60% in week 9 against the spread. Brings our overall to 41-41, right at 500, just like we're starting all over again. So we're thrilled with that. Still one of the best marks in the country. And again, we're getting hot. 55% over the past 3 weeks. At least 80% straight up the past 3 weeks. We're trending in the right direction as we enter what's going to be one of the wildest and most important months of college football. We expect ourselves to remain hot and to remain successful going forward. So a great week across the board here in week 9 for our predictions. It's a wild year, and yet somehow it's one of the better years that we've ever had. I don't know. That's 2020 for you. But let's go ahead and break down some of the madness so far. What's happened in week 9 in college football. And I don't want to start on Halloween. I actually want to start on Friday, the day before Halloween, where Minnesota, a team we have trending down, a team we'll touch more on later, but Minnesota, a team whose ship has sunk. You know, PJ Fleck's motto at Western Michigan and now at Minnesota is row the boat. We're going to row the boat. And last year they rowed the boat all the way to the season finale, where had they won, they would have gone to the Big Ten Championship, and they lost. This year it was row the boat. We're playoff contenders. We're West title contenders again. And the ship is sunk because they're now 0-2. They blew a 17-point lead to a struggling Maryland team. A Maryland team that lost by 40 points to Northwestern, a team we'll touch on later as well. Lost to 40 points to Northwestern last week. PJ Fleck's Golden Gophers led by 17 points in the fourth quarter. 17 points in the fourth quarter. But allowed the Terrapins and Talia Tagovailoa, the brother of Tua Tagovailoa, come all the way back, force overtime, and the Golden Gophers missed the PAT in overtime to lose 45-44. Tagovailoa had 450-plus yards of total offense, 5 total touchdowns on the day for the Terrapins. Keep in mind, he had like 3 interceptions against Northwestern. Horrible performance. People question, is this guy really a Tagovailoa? The Minnesota performance showed that he really was. And Minnesota is trending in the wrong direction, while Maryland maybe isn't as bad as we thought. 675 yards of total offense on this Minnesota defense. And look, I hate it for Brock Walker, the kicker that missed the PAT. But you can't put it all on him. Minnesota's defense did them no favors. Their offense was sporadic at times. The coaching wasn't the best either. So Minnesota, a team that many thought could win the Big Ten West this year, has practically eliminated themselves from that conversation. Golden Gophers sinking fast. Now let's go to Halloween Day. Let's go to Halloween Saturday, college football, the big one. And why not start with the number 1 team in the country, who barely survived? Boston College. Now I know what you're going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say. Well, they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. Clemson didn't have Trevor Lawrence, so only beating Boston College 34-28 in Death Valley, that's justified. No, it's not. It is not even close. And here is why. Trevor Lawrence to me, would not have made that big of a difference in this game against Boston College. Would Trevor Lawrence have prevented the 97-yard scoop and score that Boston College had? ETN fumbled that ball. Not Trevor Lawrence, not DJ Uiagalelei. So you look at Trevor Lawrence. Would he have done that? No. Would he have allowed 208 yards, passing yards from Phil Jurkovec? No. Would he have been so undisciplined on defense? No. So Trevor Lawrence was not the issue here. His absence was not the issue here. It was Clemson's undisciplined play. It was Clemson shooting themselves in the foot. They were down 28-10, guys, the number one team in the country, down 28-10 at home against Boston College. They were down 15 points at halftime. But after they got down by 18 points, after they trailed 28-10, they scored the final 24 points to win the game 34-28. So the Clemson defense, they woke up. They made the plays when they needed to. That included that safety right there at the end. Boston College had a chance to go down there and win the game. It was only a 32-28 game. They had a chance to go win it. Clemson's defense stepped up. They forced the intentional grounding in the end zone. Safety. Sealed the deal. But there are major holes on this Clemson team, guys. Major concerns on this Clemson team. And now Trevor Lawrence is not going to play next week in arguably the biggest game of Clemson season when they travel to Notre Dame in South Bend. He is not going to play. Which means that DJ Uiagalelei, that pronunciation, very difficult, but he had 342 yards and 2 touchdowns against Boston College. He, the freshman, the star-studded freshman, was one of the top recruits coming out of high school. He is going to have to go into South Bend, number 1 team versus number 4, number 3 team, top 5 showdown at the least, and try to lead the Tigers to a victory. That's a very tall task for a freshman. A very tall task for a freshman. Clemson survived this game. Good teams find a way to win, and that is what the Tigers did. But again, the score was not that close because Trevor Lawrence was gone. You cannot blame it on his absence. You can blame it on a lot of other things, but not that. Don't make excuses. Do not make excuses. Boston College, they fought their hearts out. They played their butts off. They did everything they could to win this game. Jeff Hafley exceeding expectations already with the Eagles. But the Eagles coming up just short. Clemson should remain the number 1 team in the country at least for another week. Staying in the early morning games, how about Cincinnati? You want to talk about playoff contenders? How about the Bearcats? The Bearcats, look, they just had back-to-back games against SMU and Memphis. All right, 2 great offenses out of the American Athletic Conference, and the Bearcats dominated both of them. They beat SMU last week on the road, 42-13. They just beat Memphis at Cincinnati, 49-10. The Bearcats never trailed in this game. They put up 513 yards of offense, held Memphis to 319. They held Memphis to 3 total rushing yards. 3 total rushing yards on the day. And this defense is still just giving up 12 points per game. Cincinnati, yeah, they're legit. Say what you want about the group of 5. Say what you want about the American Athletics. Say they haven't played anybody, but they have. There are a handful of teams in the top 25 that I don't know could beat SMU and Memphis. And if they did, could they beat them as bad as Cincinnati has beaten them? And I would say no. So Cincinnati's going to move up in the rankings at least to 6th, maybe to 5th. They have tough games at UCF and Tulsa coming up on their schedule. If they win both of those and win the American, they are without a doubt a threat for the college football playoff. And they have a very strong case for it too. Maybe better than those cases that Central Florida had just a few years ago. So look out for Luke Fickell and the Bearcats. My goodness, 49-10 over the Memphis Tigers. Bearcats are legit. Let's go over to Ann Arbor to the Big Ten. My goodness, guys. I mean, Michigan, what are you doing? That's all I can really say. I can't really find a nice way to say this for the Wolverines. I know you Wolverines fans, you feel the pain. You feel the frustration. You vented your frustration. We hear it. We know it. Michigan, the 13th ranked team in the country. They just went on the road to Minnesota last week and beat the Golden Gophers by 25. Obviously a win now that doesn't look nearly as impressive due to Minnesota's struggles. But still, to go on the road and get a win like that and to win that convincingly with a brand new quarterback in Joe Milton, I'd say that's pretty dang impressive. So Michigan comes into this game against Michigan State, a team that just committed 7 turnovers and lost to Rutgers in their season opener last week. They come into this game as 25-point favorites, and the Wolverines lost to Mel Tucker and the Spartans 27-24. 27-24. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. There was no defense in this game. Neither team committed a turnover. There were 901 combined yards of offense. And Rocky Lombardi, my goodness, Rocky Lombardi, a guy who was abysmal last year in 2019, who was a little bit shaky in the season opener against Rutgers, went into the big house and threw for 323 yards and 3 touchdowns. Every time Michigan needed to get off the field, Rocky Lombardi said, nope, I'm going to make some ridiculous throw, probably to Ricky White, who had 196 yards and a touchdown on just 8 receptions, and Michigan State kept their drives alive and converted when they needed to. It was an unreal performance, all things considered. Considering what we saw from each team in week 1, everybody, including myself, thought that Michigan would run away from this game. But instead, Harbaugh falls again to a major rival. He can't beat Ohio State. He's beaten Michigan State, twice in his career at Michigan? And an unbelievable stat that Fox put up during that game. Michigan, under Jim Harbaugh, is undefeated at home against every other opponent, any other opponent except for Ohio State and Michigan State. Where at home in the big house, he is 1-6 against those two schools. And obviously that one win coming against Michigan State because he has yet to beat Ohio State. So Harbaugh, his seat was hot going into the season. Seat is certainly hot now. Michigan, another major disappointment, and still showing that they're just not there yet. Still not there yet to be the big threat to Ohio State. Unbelievable performance, though, from Michigan State and the Spartans. No credit to take away from them. Unbelievable performance, and maybe they're going to be better than we thought. Another big upset. That was the number 13 team falling to an unranked team. We mentioned that earlier. How about this one? Number 16, Kansas State. They fall to West Virginia. Look, we called that. I know a lot of people thought we were crazy. I know a lot of people disagreed with it. We called that West Virginia upset, guys. Maybe not as bad as it was. The Mountaineers defeating the Wildcats 37-10 in Morgantown. But we knew, and we felt very confident, that West Virginia would win this game against Kansas State. Jarrett Doege, 301 yards and 2 touchdowns against this Wildcats defense. Letty Brown, 102 yards and a touchdown as well. The Mountaineers defense, that was a major reason we picked them in this game. You look at Kansas State's offense. We said if you could shut down Deuce Vaughn, you can win this game. West Virginia can win this game. Because I didn't know how well, honestly, Will Howard would be able to play at quarterback. And he did not play well. 3 interceptions against this West Virginia defense. Deuce Vaughn didn't have a big game at all. Neil Brown and his Mountaineer squad answered the call. And now they have won 5 straight games against Kansas State and the Wildcats. They pulled off the upset last year in Manhattan. They have pulled off the upset again now in Morgantown. Kansas State was one of 2 unbeaten teams in the Big 12. And as we all know, now there are none. We'll get to that other team here in a second. But West Virginia taking down the 16th ranked team in the country in convincing fashion and dominating fashion. Mountaineers taking huge steps forward in year 2 under Neil Brown. I don't want to touch much on this game, but I got to give a shout out to maybe what could be America's team. Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers. How about that? The 20th ranked team in the country out of the Sun Belt gets their first shutout since 2015, annihilating Georgia State 51-0. Keep in mind, Coastal Carolina was about a 3-point favorite going into this game on the road. I was a little iffy on it. I thought maybe Georgia State could pull off the upset. I didn't pick it. I didn't go with anything. But I thought, this has the potential to be a close game, considering how well Georgia State's played offense. And Coastal Carolina struts in there. Grayson McCall, 254 yards, 5 total touchdowns. There's a very good chance this Coastal Carolina team could go 11-0. Their 2 toughest tests remaining are against Appalachian State and Liberty. And the Chanticleers get both of them. They get both of them in Myrtle Beach. Chanticleers are for real. They're fun to watch. They're not going to be the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion because there's this team named Cincinnati in the top 10 and looks dang near unstoppable. But the Chanticleers are looking at a very, very good bowl berth and are a legitimate team in the top 25, 100%. So got to give a shout out to them. I also want to give a brief shout out to Indiana. If I'm not mistaken, the 17th ranked Hoosiers were playing in their first game as a top 20 team since 1993. They went on the road and defeated Rutgers 37-21. Now again, this was after their big win over Penn State just last week. We knew, would Indiana come in with a letdown game? Would Rutgers, emotional after that road win against Michigan State, would they have a letdown game? Or would they continue and carry over their momentum and defeat Indiana? This was a much closer game, the score indicates, and it should have been closer if one of the wildest plays I've ever seen had that not been overturned. Go back and watch it if you haven't seen it. An 8 lateral touchdown play for Rutgers. They were down 37-21. They got the onside. Indiana dialed up the pressure. It was like 4th and 28. It's a ridiculous 4th down. And Rutgers, just lateral after lateral after lateral to the point where the offensive lineman just chunked it over his head. Didn't even try to give it to anybody. Just grabbed it and threw it. And Rutgers got it and scored. They scored a touchdown. And after video review, they said there was one lateral that ended up being a forward pass, an illegal forward pass. And I disagree with that. I know it's tough to call in real time, but when you look at it on video review, it looks really too dang close to call anyways. So one of the most unbelievable plays I've ever seen. Won't even count, won't even go down in the history books, but it should have cut Indiana's lead at least down to 10. Rutgers would have gone for 2, maybe it's 8. Who knows what could have happened. But the Hoosiers, nonetheless, get the win. And maybe they are the biggest threat to Ohio State in the East because Michigan certainly isn't looking like it. Penn State isn't looking like it. Touch on them later. Who else is there? Michigan State, maybe. Indiana, maybe. It's Ohio State's division and conference to lose. But a very fun matchup there out in Piscataway, New Jersey. Indiana scoring 23 unanswered and pulling away to win 37-21. Over in the SEC, real quick, Auburn dominates the reigning national champions, LSU, 48-11. 48-11 over the reigning national champions. Now again, Miles Brennan did not play in this game for the Tigers. Bo Nix, fantastic game for him. One of the best of his career. 381 total yards, 4 total touchdowns. Does this mean Auburn's an elite team? Does this mean Auburn is a good team, one of the better teams in the SEC West? No, it doesn't. It does not. Keep in mind, everybody on social media wants to go out there and say technically now Auburn should be what, 2-4? Should have lost to Arkansas, maybe should have lost to Ole Miss. This win absolutely was legitimate. This does not mean Auburn's an elite team. What this does mean is that LSU is a bad team. LSU is a very struggling team. If Miles Brennan was there, would it have made a difference? I don't think so because LSU's defense was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It was LSU's worst loss since 1996. This is the worst start through 5 games from a reigning national champion since 1991. The Tigers dropped to 2-3. So unbelievable performance from Auburn. LSU and Ed O got a lot of things to work on. Hopefully they can get healthy very, very soon. But a very disappointing year. One that we expected when you lose that much talent that goes off to the NFL. When you have, 20-something NFL draft picks on your roster, you're going to take a little bit of a step back. And we are seeing that now from LSU down in Baton Rouge. One of the biggest games of the weekend was Texas and Oklahoma State. We mentioned a second ago between Kansas State and West Virginia. We said, all right, Kansas State was an undefeated Big 12 team. Now they have a conference loss. There was one other team paired with them that did not have a conference loss, and that was Oklahoma State, the 6th-ranked Cowboys in Stillwater. They needed this win, not just to stay atop of the Big 12, but to keep their college football playoff hopes alive. The Big 12, if you're a Big 12 guy, you wanted Oklahoma State to win this game because you wanted the Big 12 to get a team into the playoff. This was your best chance. Oklahoma won't do it. Texas won't do it. Iowa State won't do it. Baylor won't do it. This was the team. And the Cowboys went off and lost in Stillwater 41-34 in overtime. Unbelievable game in Stillwater. It was one of our games of the week, and it lived up to that hype. Now, sure, many people will comment and you will say there were a lot of questionable calls in this game. I will not dispute that. I will go out on record right now and say that the pass interference call on 3rd down in overtime for Texas was not pass interference. Their feet got tangled up. That was one of the weakest pass interference calls I've ever seen in my life. It wasn't pass interference. It wasn't pass interference. If the receiver falls down, if their feet get tangled up and they trip up, it's not pass interference. Yet it was called. Texas got the touchdown, and they ended up winning the game. But, let's keep in mind that Oklahoma State had 5 turnovers in this game, and Texas scored 21 points off of those turnovers. That's your difference maker. Sure, some questionable calls here and there. Those questionable calls wouldn't have mattered if you had taken care of the football. And if your defense, that many claimed, including myself, was the best in the Big 12, one of the better ones up in the country, defense had lived up to that hype and played the way they should have. Oklahoma State, they outgained Texas big time, 530 yards to 287 yards. But remember, shorter fields because of the turnovers and a 100-yard kickoff return for the Longhorns, that obviously skews the numbers a little bit. Definitely skews the numbers a little bit. But you look at this. The turnovers were killer. Oklahoma State led the entire game despite that up until 4:27 remaining in the fourth quarter when Texas scored on 4th down to take their lead. Spencer Sanders, though, made his return last week against Iowa State. Played well. He played even better against Texas. He was the lone bright spot for the Cowboys in this game. 400 yards for Spencer Sanders through the air. 4 touchdowns. 4 passing touchdowns for Spencer Sanders. Tylan Wallace, he had 2 of them. He had 11 receptions for 187 yards. Unreal. Also, on top of that, don't continue to question the refs. Texas had 13 penalties for 142 yards. So Texas penalties, Texas getting outgained big time. Texas not taking the lead until 4:27 remaining in the fourth. Oklahoma State had their chances. And they were unable to capitalize on them. They were unable to put the games away. It was an unbelievable matchup. It was a must-win for both teams. Oklahoma State now loses. There are no remaining teams that are undefeated in the Big 12. No remaining teams that are undefeated in conference play. The Big 12 title hopes are over. But our Big 12 playoff hopes are over. But the Big 12 title hopes for a handful of teams are still alive. Everybody wrote Texas off. Everybody wrote Oklahoma off. Their team trending up. They're all right back in the middle of that conversation because while I do have 2 losses, everybody ahead of them now has 1. And some of those tiebreakers are going to come into play later on in the year. So a great matchup and a great win by the Texas Longhorns. A must-win for Tom Herman, and he got it. If he lost this game, he was going to be on the hot seat. His team was actually going to be, to me, on fire. He answered the call, and he really needs to be thanking Joseph Asai, who had the game-winning sack on Spencer Sanders in overtime. 3 sacks on the day. 12 tackles for a loss, 12 tackles, 6 of those for a loss, and a forced fumble. So Joseph Asai, by far the player of the game on defense, maybe the player of the game as a whole for Texas, and the Big 12 once again thrown into chaos, thrown into madness relatively early in their season. The other big game of the week, Ohio State and Penn State. We just saw a top 10 team lose in Oklahoma State. Was another one going to fall in Happy Valley. No one thought it was going to happen, and it didn't. Number 3, Ohio State took care of the 18th ranked Nittany Lions, 38-25. And I really do wonder if it had been a sold-out game, the sold-out, whiteout game, would it have made a difference? I don't know. Maybe it could have. I still think Ohio State probably could have escaped with a win, but maybe it would have been a little bit closer than 13 points. Even though we did say, go back and watch our Game of the Week video, we did say Ohio State would win this game. It would be by no more than 14 points. And the Buckeyes won by 13. But they dominated this game, guys. The score maybe a little bit closer than the game really was. They outgained Penn State 526 yards to 325 yards. Outgained them by over 200 yards. The Buckeyes had 208 rushing yards to Penn State's 44 rushing yards. And Justin Fields playing dang near flawless yet again. 28 for 34, only 6 incompletions, 318 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Nittany Lions, they gave them a fight. We knew they would. People that were saying Ohio State was going to win by 30, by 24, stuff like that. That was ridiculous because that was never going to happen. I never, ever once thought that was going to happen. Even when Ohio State scored in the first few minutes. Never once thought that was going to happen. Penn State cut it to 8 points early in that third quarter, 21-13. But every time Penn State answered Ohio State, every time Penn State cut into that lead, every time Penn State had a third down, a chance to get the ball back and try to cut into that lead even more, Ohio State had an answer. And that shows how good this Buckeyes team is. Many think they're the best team in the country. I don't know if I'm going that far yet, but they're certainly a top 4 team in the country and can beat almost anybody in the nation. Ohio State winning this game in Happy Valley. The Buckeyes punting just twice. That shows you how good and efficient the offense was, taking down Penn State, a team that's trending down, a team that's 0-2 in 2020. Down in the swamp, I want to touch on that game for a second. We all saw it. How about that brawl between Missouri and Florida? Now, I wouldn't have called for the all-out brawl like that, but Missouri was very unjustified for that late hit on Kyle Trask. That was classless. It was foolish. It was absolutely ridiculous, if you ask me. It should never have ever happened. And I credit the Florida players for sticking up for their quarterback. It was one of the wildest things I've ever seen in a very long time. But Florida dominated that game against the Tigers 41-17. 514 yards for the Gators, 248 yards for the Tigers. So a couple of games here we've mentioned where the teams are just dominating the yardage here, outgaining their opponents by hundreds of yards. And we saw that here with Florida. There were concerns of whether or not the Gators would be able to bounce back after, 3 weeks off? Would they be able to bounce back and defeat Missouri, a team that's very good through the air? Will Florida's defense be able to answer the call and shut down this passing game? The answers to all those things were yes. The Gators were prepared. They were able to shut down the passing game, and they were hungry to get back on that field, winning 41-17, holding Connor Bazelak to 208 passing yards, which is pretty dang good. And Kyle Trask looked like he'd been playing the past 3-4 weeks anyways. 345 yards, 4 touchdowns, and was also the Gators' leading rusher with 47 rushing yards. Florida's legit. The offense is legit. And they've got a big matchup next week against Georgia, one that will determine the SEC East. That's going to be the fun one. More on that game later in the week. But Florida's offense versus Georgia's defense, that's going to be the storyline all week long. It's got SEC title implications. It's got college football playoff implications. And we cannot wait to see it. And obviously that game still going to be so much fun to watch and such a big deal because Florida was able to take care of business in the swamp on Saturday night. Final 2 games we want to talk about here. Another major upset, a top 15 upset. North Carolina. I was so excited to watch them this season. And they now go on the road and fall to a 1-4 Virginia team, 44-41. Keep in mind, a few weeks ago they lost to, a 1-3 Florida State team, 31-28. So UNC apparently loves to give people their second wins of the season because that's what they've done twice this year. Both times as favorites. They go on the road to take on Virginia. Again, 1-4. A team that, hung with Miami last week. Maybe wasn't as bad as their record indicated, but still. North Carolina should have won this game. And I really do think they should have won this game had they not continued to shoot themselves in the foot. They had 2 turnovers. They had tons of red zone opportunities that they missed. One at the end of the first half. They had a fumble later on in the second half. Their defense, which was relatively decent last week against North Carolina State, was non-existent against a Virginia offense that really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that great at all. North Carolina allowed 418 yards. They allowed 210 rushing yards. They got down 21 points. And again, it's very similar to what happened against Florida State. The Tar Heels were down big against Florida State and battled all the way back. It was 31-7. Battled all the way back. Scored 21 unanswered, but fell 31-28. Here against the Cavaliers, they were down 41-20. They battled all the way back, made it 44-41. So they scored 21 more points. But Bronco Mendenhall faking the punt on 4th and 3 from his own 42. The Cavaliers got it. They sealed the deal, Now they improved to 2-4. North Carolina takes their second loss of the year. To me, they are not a top 25 team. They're out of the top 25. This team still a little bit too young and still a little bit of a ways away from really contending in the ACC like we thought they were going to be able to do in 2020. So a very, very disappointing performance from the Tar Heels. I thought they had rounded a corner. I thought that win over NC State was a great bounce-back win for them. They got their mojo, they got their swagger back, and they were going to go on a tear against some inferior opponents. And that was not the case. And then finally, one of our top 5 games of the week, number 8, Texas A&M. Potential playoff dark horse hosting a hot Arkansas team down in College Station, and the Razorbacks were simply no match for the Aggies. A&M, they found themselves down 7-0 early. Arkansas, a beautiful first drive. A beautiful first drive. Forced the stop on Texas A&M's first drive. Marched the ball, 87 yards. Scored a touchdown, 7-0. After that, the Razorbacks were dominated. They were outscored 42-10. They were trailing 42-17 in this game before adding on a few late scores before falling to the Aggies 42-31. Kellen Mond made history, passing Johnny Manziel for the most total yards in Texas A&M history. He went 21 for 26 for 260 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Razorbacks. Obviously, Arkansas, not quite there yet. To go on the road to College Station at night and take down a top 10 opponent, it just wasn't in the cards. We thought it would be a little closer than it was, a little bit more competitive than it was. The Razorbacks still a ways to go, but obviously showed some signs of improvement, had some promising signs, such as the 222 rushing yards, things that Razorback fans can get excited about and can be hopeful for in the future. But the Aggies and Jimbo Fisher simply just too much in their home stadium. And again, no ranked teams remaining on their schedule as of right now. If the Aggies win out, they very well could make the college football playoff. And it all needed to start here against Arkansas, and they did, in fact, get the job done. So there you have it. A lot of games and a lot of upsets and a lot of scares and it's just madness, guys. I'm telling you, it's 2020. Again, what do we expect? No one knows what to expect week in and week out, but I'm starting to expect just madness every single week. Whatever you think is going to happen, whatever is supposed to happen, probably is not going to happen. That's what I'm starting to expect week in and week out in college football. Wild Halloween weekend here. Let's take a look at our teams trending up and trending down. We'll start on the good ones. Let's start on a high note here. Wake Forest. How about those Demon Deacons? They started off 0-2, but they've quietly rattled off 4 straight wins, including a 17-point win against Virginia. Looking pretty good now. A win over what was then the 19th-ranked Virginia Tech Hokies, and then they defeated Syracuse this past Saturday, holding the Orange to just 221 total yards. Wake Forest, Dave Clawson, they've got North Carolina on the road next week, and that certainly is looking like a winnable game. So Wake Forest, they knew we lost so much on offense. They're battling the adversity, they're adapting, and they're looking pretty dang good. 4 straight wins for them. Northwestern, 2 games into the Big Ten season, and we've already got a Big Ten team up here on teams trending up. The Wildcats are one of the worst teams in the country in 2019. 3-9, had one of the worst offenses in the country. We're nearly towards the bottom of every statistical category on offense. Not just bottom Power 5, bottom nationally, like 126, 127. The Wildcats, they've turned a corner. They're 2-0. They murdered Maryland by 40 points in week 1. Again, Maryland just beat Minnesota. The Wildcats just went on the road to Kinnick Stadium and defeated Iowa 21-20. Kinnick Stadium's not an easy place to win. They forced 3 interceptions in that game, and Pat Fitzgerald's squad is 2-0. 2-0. And there are 3 undefeated teams in the Big Ten West right now. Northwestern, Purdue, and Wisconsin. Yeah, just like we all predicted. And if Wisconsin can't play football for a while, Northwestern or Purdue could very well win the Big Ten West. Yeah, we all predicted that. We all saw that coming. I know the Wildcats won it a few years ago, but that's just, again, very fitting for 2020. But Pat Fitzgerald and the Wildcats doing a fantastic job. Huge win this past weekend. And Oklahoma, again, they're a top 25 team. We don't always put top 25 teams on the teams trending up, but they deserve it. They were 1-2. They've won 3 straight games. They beat Texas in that overtime thriller. Texas just beat Oklahoma State. That win looks good. They beat TCU. They just beat Texas Tech. They've won their past 2 games by 53 combined points. They should be 5-2 after next week. They take on Kansas, and then they host Oklahoma State on November 21st, and that's a game that will be huge. It's Bedlam. It's always a big deal, but it's huge for Big 12 title berths for both teams. So Oklahoma, we wrote them off a few weeks ago after the 1-2 start. Lincoln Riley's not going away without a fight. Teams trending down. Baylor. Look, Baylor is a team that I really had high hopes for this year. I wasn't expecting another 11-win season. I wasn't expecting maybe a return trip to the Big 12 championship, but I was expecting more. And we haven't seen that. After their dominating win over Kansas in their first game of the year, they've now dropped 3 straight. A 6-point overtime loss to West Virginia, 11-point loss to Texas, a 10-point loss to TCU this past week where they trailed 30-0. So the Bears, give them credit. They fought back. They made it respectable, but they trailed 30-0 in Waco. That's bad. And really, I think one of the biggest problems is obviously the defense for Baylor, but a lackluster run game. Charlie Brewer cannot do it all by himself. He cannot do it all by himself. He doesn't have much running help to go along with him. Baylor averaging less than 100 rushing yards per game. And of course, my man Scott Van Kale, I want to hear your thoughts on this. If anybody is interested in Baylor football, Scott is the guy to go to. He knows his stuff. He probably is the biggest Baylor insider, Baylor fan that I know of. And I'm sure he's got some great thoughts and insights on Baylor football going forward. But Baylor, 1-3, trending down. Penn State, we talked on them, 0-2, they're trending down. Losses to Indiana, losses to Ohio State. Those aren't bad teams by any means. But this was a team that started the season at 8th in the country. This was a team that had Big 10 title hopes. This is a team that had college football playoff hopes as well. Now they're about to be out of the top 25. If they're lucky, they'll stay in around 24th or 25th. But I can't justify leaving an 0-2 team in the top 25. Nittany Lions, already one of the biggest disappointments of 2020. And the same goes for Minnesota. Why are they at the bottom? Because they've sunk. They are below everything. They are atrocious. Look, I take it back. I was criticizing the AP. I was criticizing the media. I was criticizing some fans out there for not giving Minnesota the respect they deserved. I said, where's Minnesota in the rankings? Why are they ranked so low? Are we forgetting this is a team that won 11 games in 2019? Put respect on Minnesota's name. I probably shouldn't have said that because they're horrible. This is a horrible team right now, and I'm not trying to be harsh, but again, you lose your first game to Michigan by 25 points at home, that's bad. Then you go on the road to Maryland, you blow a 17-point lead to a Maryland team that lost by 40 the week before, that's bad. You allow nearly 700 yards of offense, that's bad. That is bad. Minnesota, they've got 3 winnable games coming up here. PJ Fleck can turn things around, salvage this season. 3 winnable games before they take on Wisconsin on November 28th, if in fact things are cleared up by then. But like Penn State, like a couple other teams we mentioned, Minnesota, they were a dark horse contenders for the playoff. They at least had those hopes. They had hopes of maybe making the Big Ten championship because the talent was there. Rashad Bateman came back in, opted back in when the Big Ten announced they were going to be playing football. He thought they could do something special here with Minnesota. Doesn't look like they're going to do it in 2020. It looks like their special season was last year, and it could be the last special season they have for a while. So there you have it, guys. Our Week 9 college football recap. Halloween college football. It doesn't happen very often. It's always exciting when it does, and obviously it provided a lot of fireworks. It provided a lot of upsets. It provided a lot of scares and fun for us this year in 2020. Again, one of the wildest years of college football we have ever seen. One of the most unpredictable years of college football we have ever seen. But that is what makes the sport and what makes this year in particular so great. So there you go, guys. Week 9, Week 10, even better. One of the biggest weekends of college football this season, maybe in recent history. Huge, huge games coming your way. We have analysis on those games on Tuesday. Game of the Week videos all week long. You don't want to miss it, so stay right here at the Gridiron Expert. And of course, we want to thank you all for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to check out everything down in that description. Make sure to continue to watch our videos as they come out later this week. Sign up for the Expert Picks. We're on a roll right now. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter. That's coming out later this week. Bet Now, Patreon, all that good stuff. You know where to go find it right there down in the description. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. We hope you have a safe rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.